New videos every day.
Okay, live in Austin, Texas on Tuesday, September 8th, 2009. And this is going to be part 4 of my new series on counseling, working with children, guided by principles of understanding their true nature. So in part 1, I laid out some views on true nature, and in part 2, I looked at a couple of important conditions that are necessary to allow this nature to blossom and flourish. And I talked specifically about mirroring and modeling, how important that is. And then in part 3, the emphasis especially on seeing your child through the eyes of delight. So these ideas come from my books, The Wildest Colts Make the Best Horses, and True Nature and Great Misunderstandings, with my lovely daughter on the cover. And here I want to talk a little bit about the nature of psychological distress and emotional healing. Okay? We have this glorious true nature, but it's also true that we have this incredibly long dependency period. It takes human beings decades to mature, even at a physical level. Growth spurt in the brain between age 21 and 25. So even on a physical level, there's this long, long period. And on a psychological and emotional level, there's this very, very long dependency period because of how complex we are, because of how we've evolved. It means that we have a tremendous vulnerability to conditioning and a tremendous vulnerability to being hurt and thrown off course from expressing our true nature. Vulnerability means able to be wounded. You can think of it that way. You know, it's one thing to talk about this glorious nature of brilliant intelligence and zestfulness and vitality and loving warmth and affection. But if you don't also somehow take into account the capability and practices of human beings towards meanness and stupidity and even hideous atrocities that we see in constant warfare, violence, aggression, stupid decisions about how to handle the environment, all these different things. If you just ignore those things, you're living in some kind of Pollyanna universe. But if you only focus on those things, then you miss all the kindness and all the generosity and all the loving, right? So are these just both aspects of our nature, this dark side, light side, this angel, devil kind of energy? Well, that's one interpretation, but I like the idea that when we're hurt, it affects us in a certain way where we act outside of our true nature. There's lots and lots of psychological theories floating around out there, but one very simple one that I like is the theory of reevaluation counseling. You can look it up, rc.org. I like it because it's non-professional. I mean, it is true that occasionally we can use some professional help, some one-way counseling, someone to listen and support us, someone who doesn't believe in these imagined biological and genetic diseases like ADHD and chemical imbalances and things like that, and brain diseases that presumably determine our behavior, but someone who knows how to listen, how to support, how to counsel in a good way. But most of the time it comes from friends and family. And for children, 99.9% of the time, it comes from the parents, or well, that's as it should be. Actually, we turn our children over so much to other authorities like the government schools and things like that, and parents, oftentimes, unfortunately, we've kind of abdicated our role. But in principle, and hopefully in practice more and more in your own lives, you're the one who your child is going to show their distress to. You are going to be your child's primary counselor, no matter how many hours a month you take them to a professional counselor like me, right? So here's how it works. The idea is you start out with what RC calls point zero. It's this true nature that I've already described, this brilliant intelligence, this loving relational tendency, this energy and zestfulness and vitality. You see it in little children. But when we're hurt, it causes distress. It's a very simple kind of theory. When we're hurt and in pain, it causes distress. And guess what? That distress obscures or interferes with our true nature. is the idea. That loving kindness and intelligence turns into a little bit more mean-spiritedness and stupidity, to put it bluntly. We don't think as well, and we tend to get kind of unkind or kind of withdrawn. Those are faces of distress. If it's not safe, for example, if that distress is caused by the very person that a child would normally turn to for solace, say, your parent is abusing their child, they're yelling at their child, they're hurting their child. The child can't turn to that same parent for solace. So what happens? It just shuts down in these chronic patterns of withdrawnness or aggressiveness or impulsivity or any kind of unkindness. And a more rigidity and less flexible way of thinking gets installed as a chronic pattern. But if it's safe, guess what? We have this built-in mechanism of emotional discharge or emotional release or just emotion. The expression of emotion, many times and in many ways, is a way that we restore ourselves to sanity, so to speak, meaning our true nature. Child falls down, gets hurt, crawls in mama's laps and cries. The tears are the healing. The problem is oftentimes we confuse the hurt with the release of the hurt. And we think if we stop the child from crying and give them a lollipop or something, it's all better. That's a confusion. The crying is the release of the hurt. The hurt is already there. So the crying is good. We say, good, cry, get it out. Yeah, that's right. Do you need to cry? Yeah, go ahead. The tears are the healing of sadness and hurt. The child's insulted, frustrated, loses a toy, isn't able to reach what they want. Guess what? It's time for a tantrum. Anger, storming. That is the release of insult and frustration. Tears and tantrums, those are good things. They're not a problem. It's called, oh, you're having some hard feelings. I'll just sit with you while you're tantruming. Go ahead and get that out. Got the idea? With fear, frightening experiences, guess what? It's called shaking, trembling, sweating. Ooh! That's how we release fears. There's other forms of discharge, yawning. Laughing's a great one for releasing light fears, as well as embarrassments, humiliations. So these forms of expressions can be encouraged and supported. I describe all this in my books, and most of it's based on basic RC theory, but the principle is pretty simple. It's just to allow this expression, to encourage this expression, to listen to this expression, and to stay kind of close, just close enough to the child that allows that expression to continue. It gets a little more complicated with intense anger and rage, or with intense kind of terror. The principles are the same. It takes a little more sustained attention and awareness from the part of the adult. But the principles are the same. I'll do some more segments on specific emotions at a later date. Maybe do one on crying and one on anger and one on fear and one on shame. But the principle through all of them is to be relaxed and confident enough that this is an expression of healing, to allow your child that listening is good, that expression is good. And out of that comes a restoration of true nature, or a reemergence of the true self, and that affinity and closeness and lovingness and intelligence. Stay close, allow the expression, and it'll get better. Okay? So that's the nature of psychological distress and emotional recovery in very simple ways. Those very simple terms, though, go a long way to cover probably 90% of what you're going to run into. All right? Thanks.
If you liked this video, we have hundreds of more alternative videos ranging from sexual health to psychology to mind control. So if you liked it, go ahead and click on me to enter the Psychetruth channel.